This is the CreaseCast.
Episode number 173 of the CreaseCast, folks. We got a jam-packed show. We're going to quickly run through some Canucks news. We're probably not really going to talk about the games because, honestly, the Penguins game was basically, okay, JT Miller really good. And then they played the Calgary Flames in quite possibly one of those boring hockey games of all time.
God. It was...
That was...
I think we can talk about that, in terms of,
Just
the
how
monumental scale of how bad it was.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw
ugly.
what... I don't know if you saw the... I think so there was a tweet by Madison Cuckoo, who is related to Slater Cuckoo. I believe she works for Sportsnet herself. She was at the game, and she tweeted out a picture of her standing in line, essentially in a line for water at the Saddle Dome, because of the health mandates that Alberta has in place, they cannot do food or beverage sales in the building. Sure. So the only thing that they were offering at the time were literally a big pitcher of water for people to come fill the small, literally the office cups out of, right? Like the little office cone cups, those paper cups. Yeah. Out of the big jugs, essentially,
like the little water coolers,
the portable water coolers, essentially. And I tweeted it out, these people, these poor Flames fans had to watch that entire game stone cold sober. You had to watch one of the most boring games of all time. And I say this all the time, whenever a person I know is oh, I'm taking my friend to their first hockey game or something, I'm always I'm always telling them, please let me pick the game for you, because I don't want you to take them to a game that's going to absolutely be a slog from beginning to end, because those are not fun and turn you away from the sport. If that was anyone's first game, good Lord, they were never coming back.
Zero chance they're ever watching a hockey game again. The Canucks have had some stinkers this season. Let's be real. It's not it's out of the ordinary that it was a bad game. But a 1-0 game in today's NHL is rare. I don't want to say it's rare, but it's it's getting phased out. We're in high scoring territory. Toronto, Detroit went 13 goals. I think Florida and Columbus right now are at 12 goals right now. Mason Marchman has 6 points. We're going in the way of where goalies are getting very good, but yet somehow games have never been higher for scoring. It's kind of weird how that works. Goalies save percentages have never been higher, but at the same time goal scoring has never been at its peak. It's the gap between the elite and the league average is enough that you can get these insanely high scoring games. And unfortunately for the Canucks, that game on Saturday was none of it. There was some good goaltending from both guys, but my God, absolutely torturous gameplay to watch. The Canucks had 1 shot on goal, 2 shots on goal in the first period, in the first 20 minutes. It was,
they were, oh God.
It was gross. It was not, you couldn't even be haha, at least, shoot, they tried their darndest. It was
Tyler Mott had their only shot and it was shorthanded. It was on a shorthanded attempt. There's the whole time. We can't talk about the whole
I'm
Tyler
Myers
right thing.
Yeah. So first period, Calgary outshot Vancouver 7-1. That's it.
Which, it wasn't even they blew him out of the water. And that was with a 5-minute major to Tyler Myers. They still only mustered 7 shots in that first period. We could talk about that too, the Myers hit and how bad it was. He said today, he's it's just because I'm tall. It's no, it wasn't. You don't hit like that. People were saying, oh, so what? They were oh, so Tyler Myers isn't allowed to hit anybody because he's tall. I'm look, Tyler Myers doesn't hit people like that generally. He's actually a pretty clean hitter for the most part. He doesn't take a lot of bone cruncher hits that people seem to think he does, which is the perception because he's tall.
The most bone-crunching hit he landed in his NHL career was the one on Duncan Keith, which is the one that got him a pass for this season because it was so good. Yeah. But to your point, he isn't known for a guy who goes hard into the boards and, hits and throws his body around. He just doesn't because he's kind of a big giant Bambi. It's a lot of limbs.
And honestly, not to try and be mean, not to be mean, but often he's chasing the play. He's not in a case of a guy where say like they're like, you've had your guys in Vancouver where they're quick on the puck and they're just throwing bodies around like every single time they're on the ice, because that involves like being able to hit guys like that involves being able to be as quick as they are and being able to play at that pace. Myers isn't often that, which means he doesn't hit guys very often. So when you see what he did last night or the other night on Saturday, where
Yeah.
he literally like
Just trucked him into the boards.
like very clearly was trying to put Trevor Lewis through the glass. And like, I get he's mad because there should have been a penalty there. Like Trevor Lewis clearly threw a punched him in the face.
But it was clearly a revenge hit that went awry because naturally Tyler Myers is a monster. And that's going to happen when you intentionally try to hurt someone.
Yeah. And he's not a good hitter. Like it's one of like,
he doesn't do it.
Because you can throw clean hits that just knock the wind out of somebody.
Yeah.
Like, but that wasn't that.
Guys over. Like you can do those things.
Yeah.
Without like recklessly endangering someone's like, brain capacity. Like you can do these two things can exist at the same time, but it doesn't usually come from the guys that don't do it all the time because they don't do it enough. But the referees called the play appropriately, issued a game misconduct, a match penalty, which doesn't really happen all that often.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the key difference between say just a regular game misconduct and a match penalty is you get only like essentially only if the ref believes there was intent to injure on that play. Mm-hmm. So if you get hit with a match penalty, which is kind of rare in today's NHL, like the ref was like, yeah, you tried to injure this player and you're gone. You can get a game like most of the time when there's hit to the head, it's often just a game misconduct in a lot of those cases where it's just like, oh, we don't know, but you hit him in the head, so you're gone. Like that one was very clearly the ref was like, nope, you did that on purpose, you're gone. And I'm honestly surprised he's not suspended. Like that's kind of incredible, but also Department of Player Safety par for the course.
I think what I'd read or what I'd heard was that when usually refs issue a match penalty, that's viewed as like a 1 game suspension because you take them out of the game. So the docs is kind of like, oh, well, he's already been properly assessed a fine, air quotes, on the play.
I mean, I guess like,
it doesn't make sense to me either. Like I'd still be like, like he still played the first 5 minutes. So like,
and there should still be something more. Like even if you're just like, okay, you already got 1, so we'll give you instead of 3, we'll give you 2. Like there should have probably been something more than what they got, than what he got there, which was nothing.
He kind of got a freebie on that one, but I mean,
a little bit.
That's the only thing that really remarkable from that game. It was tedious. It was boring. Not worth talking about. What we do have worth talking about, though, is that was the first or the second game under the Canucks' new general manager hired by Jim Rutherford, president of hockey operations, Patrik Allvin. So for those that don't know, Patrik Allvin was the former assistant GM to the Pittsburgh Penguins under Jim Rutherford at the time. Allvin's duties at that time, I believe, were to run the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins for the AHL affiliate. Then when Jim Rutherford moved on, he still retained mostly the AHL duties and kind of took on like a scouting position. But I guess his name came out pretty early in the GM search. Like, I think he was honestly one of the first names that came out as one of the guys that's most likely going to lead the pack. Took a bit of a detour here and there with apparently guys like Matthew Darche impressing in their interviews with Jim Rutherford, which caused him to double think or double check on whether or not Allvin was his guy. But nonetheless, didn't matter. The existing relationship took precedence, and Patrik Allvin becomes the first Swedish GM of the National Hockey League and joins a rather diverse, and I use a little bit of air quotes because at the end of the day, he's still a cisgender white dude, but pretty diverse. I mean, I think this was said on the broadcast. Like, it's pretty funny that being diverse means being a white Swedish man hired to a GM position in the NHL. So kudos to him. That's a little something. You know, he gets to work with fellow Swedes, Danny and Hank, up in the press box. Pretty exciting. I think tonight's actually, as
his
we're
first
recording
night
this,
on first day.
is actually it's my first day. He gets his my name is tag in the Chicago Blackhawks press box.
He has to
As we're
do all
recording this,
the computer training where it's like, okay, this is the employee handbook. Make sure we need you to learn all the quiz, like do all the quizzes, like
yeah,
mopping up the floor, like
yeah. Don't run
clocking
with
in.
scissors. Clocking
Yeah,
clocking
I
out.
wonder
Your
what
lunch break is.
I would love to know what the Canucks, what the procedure is for that kind of thing, like for an NHL organization, specifically, obviously Vancouver. Like, what kind of
This is a
training
practice
that
club.
specifically like a GM or major front office person has to go through? Do they just walk in, get
They
their
probably
badge,
just
or
walk in. They
like
probably assign them like here's your office assistant. Any questions you have, direct to this person, and they
is
will tell you
yeah.
what to do.
Is there a history of the Canucks quiz you have to pass, like on
I doubt it.
their learning? That honestly, maybe, like, who
Maybe they
knows?
give you like a book with like people's like faces and their names, like a refresher kind of book, so you
Mm.
just have the gist of like who's who.
Yeah,
Because
there
like
you
what
go.
wasn't it Bruce Boudreau when like his first day coaching, he had no idea who Juho Lammikko's name was, and so he had to be
Yeah, I think
corrected by
so.
like the press, and he's like, the guy with Highmore and Mott, and they're like
Uh,
Lammikko. He's like,
and
yeah, that
now
guy.
and now Lammikko is his favorite player.
Now he's a first
Like,
line player, which
now
is
he's the first line guy, which is
super rad.
concerning. And we'll talk a bit about that because we're so just to give everybody a little bit of backstory, we're recording right now during Vancouver,
Third
Chicago.
period just started.
Third period just started, 2-0 Canucks right now. And obviously this shouldn't have been our first show since Patrik Allvin went, but I didn't do a show on Friday for a couple different reasons. One, I had just gotten my booster, my booster shot for COVID a couple
Mhm.
days ago. It really took me out Thursday, and even Friday, I was still kind of feeling like a little bit of lingering effects on it, so I
Yeah.
wasn't really feeling 100% personally at the time. So I was like, and also part of me was like, for an episode like that, like obviously Cody, you're only doing the shows, the first show of the week right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times lately, some of the biggest news of the
I know
week
that
has been
they
coming
keep
out,
dropping it on Wednesdays or
dropping.
Thursdays.
Yeah,
It's like, why do you guys keep doing this?
exactly.
It's
So
very
you're not
rude.
here to exactly. It's very rude. So you haven't been here to talk about it. So I kind of was like, I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I don't mind wait. It's okay waiting like the extra till Monday, so
Yeah.
we can get you to talk about literally like one of the most important decisions made by the organization over the next little while. And yeah, like going into like we're talking about Allvin and everything. Um, yeah, like people are like, oh, so he just went with his guy at the end, and like people are of course going into the whole, like, it's just another case of like guy going with his buddy that he knows kind of thing. It
Yeah.
is a little
It's a
different in
bit
this
like
case.
that, but it's slightly different because
He
Alvin wasn't a guy who, like, say, had been on the job for like 2 years, right? Like, it was a guy who'd been in Pittsburgh before Rutherford was even there. Like, he put in a
Yeah.
ton of work in the organization, working his way up from just like an amateur scout for the European leagues to the director of amateur scouting to director of player personnel. Like, he pretty much worked his way all the way to the top, and so it's not like it's an unwarranted promotion. And
No.
Jim Rutherford's whole thing was he isn't opposed to hiring a first time GM that he can mold into someone that, succeeds at the job, because he says that's something about his job that he really enjoys. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit like, I'd say it's like 50-50. It's like, one, you're kind of irritated, or like you just kind of like, it wasn't Matthew Darsh like a really valuable
Matthew
option
Darsh was an
considering he
interesting
just
option.
won 2 cups back to back with Tampa?
Yeah.
Like, his
Yeah.
cap management, his AHL team experience, like, you'd think that'd be very valuable to a team that
God.
needs some serious cap fixing and an overhaul to their development process. Like, just a
Yeah.
hunch.
Yeah.
Just so I understand that part of the irritation, but it's diverse enough, and Alvin could end up being a good pick for this organization, provided he is on the same page with Rutherford for their future plans.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, I think they did their due diligence in terms of actually like interviewing other candidates, even because
For sure.
I think the biggest, like, with like last time the Canucks did this, Trevor Linden, I don't believe interviewed anybody except Jim Benning when that happened.
Yeah.
Or it was something along those lines where it was kind of, he had already kind of knew exactly where he was going before he
It was
even
like I can't
Like,
remember the story, but it was basically like approaching the 2014 draft. Like he was zeroed in on Jim Benning or prying Jim Benning out of Boston because the rumors were that Benning was one of those guys that was going to be sought after in free agency when his contract was expired with Boston.
yeah,
So the Canucks sought him out ahead of time. And of course, Boston was like, yeah, sure, take him. We don't care. And
yeah, and the rest is history.
that worked out very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, like I just wanted to see them like go through the process of actually interviewing a bunch of other candidates and stuff,
Mhm.
because at least then it can be like, well, we still felt that, like, I felt that this was still the right candidate, but
Yeah,
I made sure I went through and didn't miss any avenues beforehand. So, and like even from that point of view, like looking at the other candidates that were interviewed, for me, like Allvin and Matthew Darsh, considering that, like, admittedly, I don't know much about either of them, like, about Pittsburgh, like, what the assistant GM of Pittsburgh gets up to, like, what
sure.
Tampa, obviously a little different, but even then, it was a case of more discussing, like, Julian Brisebois and Steve
Right.
Yzerman before him rather than Matthew Darsh. It was one of those things like, oh, inner hockey people knew who they were, but, like,
Mhm.
to the average person who's not watching a lot of Lightning or Penguins games,
Yeah, you just
yeah,
have
you
no idea
might
who
not
he
know who
is,
they
right?
are. Yeah. But like there were other candidates out there where I was like, oh, I don't like that one. I don't like some of these picks. So I would much rather they go with one of these two, being Allvin or Darsh. And I
Right.
was fine with either of them. There's nothing like offensive about what Allvin could potentially bring to the table. Like, uh, there is obviously
Yeah,
the
like
argument of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton hasn't necessarily been the strongest AHL team over the
yeah,
last little while, but as I think Jackson McDonald pointed out, that makes a lot of sense when you consider the fact that every year
every
they're
top
going
player
for
from their
it,
team usually ended up in,
graduating to the
yeah.
Penguins and doing pretty darn well. And they're also going for it every year with Crosby and Malkin.
Mhm.
So they're not necessarily like
Like
spending.
they didn't need their AHL team to be like the best team in the league, right?
No,
Because
they just need
all they needed was one or two guys, like their top two
yes,
defensemen, top three forwards to be able to slide into the NHL lineup and be a contributor. And for whatever reason, don't know how, it
it
kept on
kept
working out
working.
that they did. And
Yeah,
if they can bring that kind of knowledge, they can port that knowledge to the Vancouver Canucks. Like that's a gold mine waiting
yeah.
to be explored for them. So yeah, like I'm fine with it. I think when Rutherford was hired, he said he had a list of 50 candidates for
Which
potential
is
GM, which is
great.
obviously a lot of guys and women to work through. And obviously they settled on Emile Castonguay, Rachel Dory. Like
There's more probably coming
and there's more
too.
coming. Like,
Garrett
yeah,
Clancy
he
as well.
clearly put in the work on how he would want to structure his front office, and like I loved his one of his recent press conferences where he basically went over how much he needed to fix in the executive structure
Yes.
to build a competitive boardroom that actually leads to success long term. Like
Yeah.
that's great. Like if he had
He
50 GM candidates, that doesn't mean some of those 50 can't be picked up for director
other
roles
things.
or
Yeah.
executive positions, right? Like that's encouraging to know that he came into the organization and did his homework. Like that
Yeah.
could not be said really about the last regime,
No.
who seemed to be faulted by their willingness to just make rash decisions on the fly without really considering the bigger picture. And
Yeah.
it looks like we've got a team being cobbled together right now that looks like they're going to be thinking bigger picture, and that's great.
Yeah. My one question is about this whole the way that the Rutherford went through building this team. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much because he's made it clear that he still kind of has final say on everything. So this is a lot less of a say like a Kyle Dubas in Toronto sort of style of GM more, and it's a lot more of a George McPhee what and who the G who Kelly McCrimmon situation in Vegas where McPhee technically gave the GM role up, but he
Right.
still is still
He's
making
still
the
a part
final
of
call.
the executive branch that really
Yeah,
makes the final decisions. Jim Rutherford's
yeah,
the same thing. He's going to probably
Yeah.
He's like Trevor Linden, right? He's going to execute team direction, and Patrik Allvin's job is to execute that vision and that plan, provided
Yeah.
he's on board with it.
Mhm.
And I'm completely fine with that because I don't know about you, but you've been following all the quotes today about trade ships and
Yeah.
cap
God.
problems. And all I can say is, like, if that's coming from Jim Rutherford, that's coming from Patrik Allvin now, and it's coming now apparently from Stan Smeal. So it looks like the executive branch of the Vancouver Canucks operation are all in full agreement that they need to sell high on everyone they can while they still can, if they ever want to get this team going in the right direction.
Yeah. And yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask you, like, as getting into that, like, with the like you mentioned, the cohesiveness of the office and everything, are you at all worried that, like, because like Allvin didn't hire his own assistant GMs and everything like that, is there any worry in your mind that, like, oh, because this is a group that wasn't necessarily assembled by
By
the
Allvin.
by Allvin, that it could end up being a case where they don't all get
It
along, like they're like, obviously you want people to not see
Sure.
all in the exact have the exact same opinions on everything, but like, do
Yeah.
you worry at all that, like, there might be that people might butt heads in a way that's unproductive?
Someone I work with said that you never want to be the smartest man in the boardroom. You want to be surrounded by a group of people that are smarter than you. You don't ever want to be the smartest guy there, because then that means you've done something wrong. I am
Right.
completely fine if the group doesn't get along, frankly. I just need them to believe in Jim Rutherford's vision and long-term planning for the organization, right?
Mhm.
Like, even when Trevor Linden first started, he inherited Lawrence Gilman and Lauren Hennig, right? Like, he didn't like pick everyone. He picked Jim Benning to execute his vision of rebuilding on the fly, which, whether that's Trevor Linden's vision, whether that's a vision sold to him by Jim Benning or ownership, like, we don't really know the real details of it. But
And
the
we
point
never will.
is, and we probably never will. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's NDAs being signed there, but
Linden
the
might write a
idea
book
is
someday, but
that'd be the dream. But
yeah.
the point is, like, you want an executive who is calling the shots and is executing the vision that they see for the team with a long-term focus. And so Jim Rutherford's probably hiring Allvin on the pretense that, look, we're going to be surrounding you with Emily Cassinggay, who's going to be your cap person. We're going to get second GM Derek Clancy. We're going to evaluate our entire scouting department, and we're going to see how everyone can come together to fulfill a vision that means in 4 years or 3 to 4 years, we are back to being a playoff contender and champion caliber team. If that means, some arguments along the way where some people don't agree with the player or their assets, like, that's good. That was what was missing in the last regime's final 4 to 5 years, was there
Yeah.
wasn't enough voices to say, like, this doesn't make sense. This player does not work for our competitive window. This contract doesn't work for our competitive window. And it
No one
seems
there to
like,
say we need to stop jamming the square peg into the round hole. Like,
exactly. Instead, you had a bunch of guys that were hammers, who were
yeah.
just
We're
going
just
to
like,
keep on hammering away, hoping that this next big deal is going to be the one that finally gets that square peg in the round hole. But
yeah.
now it seems like, no, we've got a bunch of people on the executive branch who have been given voices, like amplified voices. Like, the fact that Stan Smeal was on an intermission right now to talk about team direction, like,
Holy cow. They never would
that's
have done that.
that's pretty unreal, because I think I've talked about this on the podcast. Like, back when Trevor Linden was getting phased out, I requested a media or an interview with Stan Smeal to talk about something completely unrelated to the current status of the Vancouver Canucks. And I was declined because the executive branch at that time didn't want guys voicing anything. They didn't want information coming out that they didn't approve of, right? And now you've got what appears to be a giant group of people who are all on the same page and are being allowed to voice that publicly in interviews on a major network on a 4:30 p.m. game against the worst team in the Central. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. There's like, we're gonna get obviously into all the player rumors and stuff right now going on, because there's a
Yeah,
lot of them.
Let's do it because there's quite a few.
Yeah, there is one, but there's one more thing I wanted to talk about that they mentioned that I'm really excited about, and maybe this is just going to be me getting on my soapbox. We'll see. But one thing that Jim Rutherford talked about that I really liked, like when during the Allvin press conference and everything, like there was obviously the talk about making the players happy and everything, and like trying to make sure that people wanted to play here and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things he mentioned in kind of in that line of thinking was not just renovating all the facilities that the Canucks already have, but also getting a practice facility built for the team or getting one done. Which, so if anyone like first, I know for some people, like they're going to think like this is probably not like, oh, why? There's plenty of ice rinks around. There's plenty of like Canada's full of rinks. And I get that thinking, especially from like in a Canadian market, that it's like, why would you need your own rink? There's already so many but one of the things, like right now, the Canucks practice mostly at 8 rinks. Like if the Rogers Arena isn't available, which honestly is a fine rink. Like it's a fine place to go.
It's
practice.
a fine rink, but it's like
it's
nowhere
lacking
near where any of them live either, right? Like you want the practice arena to be in the same kind of area as the Rogers Arena, because that's where all the players are situated. Like you want it to be easy access.
Or at the very least, you need it to have like a permanent space for you there, where it's like, so, and they used to actually, the Canucks used to have permanent facilities at 8 rinks. I forget exactly when they got rid of it. It was sometime, I believe, in the it might have been in the like mid to late the late 2000s, early 2010s, kind of around when the team was at its best, I think. Like it might have been in that timeline, but either way, now they just kind of are paying like rent, like essentially like 8 like rink rentals to go there, but they don't have the facilities there anymore that they used to.
Yeah.
And one thing in that is very different about that setup in the States is that a lot of teams own their own practice facilities and have built their own places just to their like specifications. And that's become a big way
It's
to bring
like
in
a new
players.
way to entice players to want to play for the teams. Thomas Strands had been talking about it for quite a bit on Canucks Hour, I think last week, where that was one of the big selling points of the Mike Gillis era, was that we are going to be building a practice facility to use, and it never came, which
it never came. And there was even very recently, like Patrick Johnson was talking about, there's the whole redevelopment plan for the Plaza of Nations area, like right out in front of the BC Place and Rogers Arena, that's supposed to have a rink that the Canucks were going to be managing, and that was going to be their practice facility. They walked out of that deal before even COVID hit. Like that was in January of 2020, when we didn't even know the world was going to shut down. So it wasn't even a case of like, oh, we cut it for business expenses because of everything else going on. They had just quietly walked away from it before that. And like I went, like when I was living in the Bay Area, I practiced at Sharks. I played games at Sharks Ice, which is owned by the Sharks. And it's not only, they don't just own that one. They also own another rink in Fremont, another 2 sheets in Fremont. They operate the 2-sheet Oakland Ice Center. And then their main one right now, which already had 4 rinks. They're adding a 5th one, which is going to be kind of which is going to be the arena for the Barracuda. It's going to have about, I believe,
the one that's being in construction right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're getting a similar setup to what the Laval Rocket have for the Canadiens farm team, where they're going to have their practice facility set up right next to the AHL team. And that facility is great. Like it's it's not even necessarily the most up to date, because I believe that one was built in the early 2000s when it was done. So it's not even necessarily considered state of the art by today's hockey standards. But despite all that, it's a great place if you're somebody, like it's a great place for an NHL player to go. They had their own parking, they had their own weight room there. They had all of the trimmings that you get in an NHL arena in a different place to practice, and that you go to every single day. You have your lounge for the players, like everything you could want there. So as the Canucks, you might be considered, Vancouver, one of the prime destinations for any NHL free agent. That's a big selling point of concern that you don't have that. because a
Mhm.
lot of other teams are going to be able to go, look, we have this tremendous practice facility built just for you where you have your own private space, your own private everything. And the Canucks have to be like, we bust you out to 8 rinks
Yeah.
3 times a week because there's a Celine Dion concert coming through Rogers Arena, so you can't
Yeah.
use the ice.
Sorry, folks.
And that is like, that's important. Like Sharks Ice is a drive away from SAP Center. Not a long one, but it is one. It's just that they want that. Like, that's something that it's a must have at today's NHL level. Like, you even like teams that you would consider like, oh, there's no way that they have it. The Islanders have one. The Ducks have multiple. Like, the Kings have a really good one. Like, some of like the lower end, like the Panthers, for all the worries with their money issues that we've talked about in terms of like how much money they're making on a yearly basis these days. They're building one right now. They're building one out of like a war memorial in Fort Lauderdale, I believe, right now. So like, you have to have that now in today's NHL. So for him to come out and be like, we're going to get that done is great to see. It's just a matter of now is where is it going to go?
Yeah. Not a lot of available real estate in Vancouver, and
Certainly not for cheap.
and it's not cheap. That is the thing. That's probably why so many of the practice arena deals fall through, is that they probably got like a premium deal on the Pacific Coliseum area set aside, and it fell through because they probably wanted some discounts from the city, and the city said, yeah, no, you have to pay full price, not our problem.
Yeah.
Which
I mean,
is just the way things go.
Yeah. And look, you don't have your practice rink, I promise you, does not need to be on waterfront property. That's fine. Like,
Yeah.
if you can't afford Plaza
You
of
don't have to follow
Nations,
monopoly rules. Waterfront is the most valuable spot in or no, isn't it Boardwalk? Is it Boardwalk or Waterfront?
Boardwalk and Park Place are your
Park Place.
two
Why am I thinking Waterfront?
well, because Boardwalk, like, that is waterfront. Like, that's same basic idea. Like, you're not wrong. You're not off on that one, right?
Oh,
Because
maybe.
you're yeah, like, it just be like, it could also be seawall. Like, they like,
There you
and
go.
that's the thing, right? It doesn't have to be an expensive plot of land. It just has to be like, okay, can
It
we
just has to
bus
be
you
land.
there can we bus you to a play or is it nearby driving distance for you? And it's in a nice area where we can fit literally everything an NHL player could ever want on a
Yeah.
daily basis. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah. Well, some players that might not be here to witness a practice facility. Let's get into the rumors. The Adele rumor has its section of the night. Obviously, just fair warning. None of these are actually confirmed. Like, people have reported that other teams are calling about these players, but it isn't vice versa. No one's saying any of these players are being shopped by the Canucks. They're just taking calls on these players, which is what every single team in the NHL does every single day regarding every single player on their lineup. It doesn't mean anything, but it speaks to the current direction of the club, where they have a lot of guys on expiring deals who they need to determine whether or not they're going to extend them long term, or if they're going to sell them while they're still high, commit to the rebuild, commit to losing, potentially some damage with the locker room. But this is just what happens when you toil for 8 years, accomplish nothing, and you end up capped out with no prospect pool and a mediocre team who, albeit they did just shut out the Chicago Blackhawks.
No,
Doesn't really mean much because it's the Blackhawks. Like, who cares? They're fucking garbage. But
yeah,
they're doing their due diligence, which is, as you're saying in our evaluation of Patrik Allvin, that's kind of the best case scenario for this management group, is that they're at least listening to people calling about these players, and they're not saying no to anything outright. Like, there's nothing being leaked saying, guys called on Luke Shen, but Jim Rutherford and co are saying, no, Luke Shen forever. Like,
Yeah.
just not the way it is. So let's go through these. Bo Horvat, let's just play the guessing game because we could be here for hours discussing each guy. I'm going to ask you, Bo Horvat, do you think he gets traded? Yes or no?
Flat no. And I think that's been more or less not confirmed by Elliot Friedman, but he basically said that, like, Pettersson,
one of the untouchables,
Hughes,
right?
yeah, Pettersson, it's Pettersson, Hughes, Demko and Horvat. And I know for some people, they're probably like, why is Horvat an untouchable? Because
Yeah.
like in theory, like it is kind of an interesting one that like, yes, he's your captain, but he's also like not necessarily your best forward. He's a little bit what he brings to the table is very good, but it's a little bit, and I'm not going to say like completely replaceable, but there is definitely parts of his game that are like that you could find in other players in other ways. I will say though, with that in mind, that I do think keeping him is a very vital move for them. And the
Yeah.
reason why I'm of that mindset is because like it's you and I've talked about it before. Like especially this year in particular with Horvat, where he has shown a lot of times lately what a true NHL captain needs to be. And like
Right.
that goes beyond what you're doing on the ice.
Yeah.
And that in itself is hard to find. The kind of player that
Mhm.
Bo Horvat is off the ice about social issues, about everything else. Like
Mm.
that's true leadership as we've talked about it before. You can be the guy in the locker room who's like, "Come on, boys, let's get up and go get this dub." Like, but anybody can do that. Like that's not something necessarily even your captain has to be. Your captain needs to be the guy who can be a leader, not just for your team, not just on the ice, but in your community as well. And considering like that, he's the last link to the Sedin era of the team and everything. I honestly think that keeping Horvat is a very good move in terms of setting a tone for what your franchise is, setting a tone for how to carry yourself at the NHL level and what the values are of the franchise. So I think that in mind, Horvat is a good player to hang on to.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. And I think because of his age too, it's just kind of like, do you really sell the low? Or I actually wouldn't be selling low, but would you sell now on a captain, or would
It's a
you?
weird spot. It would be a
Yeah,
very weird spot to sell on your captain, and yeah, like he contributes. Like
yeah. He's
he's
not
a
playing like
valuable.
Jason Dickinson with 2 points in the last like 20 games. Like, no,
I
the guy
feel
is
yeah.
clutch as fuck.
Yeah.
All right, JT Miller. This one is probably a bit more spicy because, in my opinion, JT Miller, you'd probably want to move now while his value is at its absolute peak, because I don't think the Canucks, with their current contracts allocated to the defensemen, are going to drastically improve next year, barring some kind of unbelievable overhaul of their defensive group, which, as we know, is going to be very hard because that OEL contract is an anchor. Myers, I don't think you're moving. Like, it's just not happening. Hamonic signed for another year and he hasn't even played.
Oh
Like,
God,
it's not
I keep
pretty.
forgetting he's here. Like I
Hey,
keep
I
forgetting.
think I think Jim Rutherford probably is going to be told, "Oh, Hamonic's ready to come back," and he's going to be like, "Oh, he's on my
Yeah,
team.
no.
Who?" Yeah,
Yeah,
he's gonna be like, "No, he's going to be
no.
in the AHL." But regardless, like, the cap picture is not pretty on defense, and that's where they drastically need to overhaul everything. So, like, JT Miller at this point, to me, I feel like the only way you're getting rid of him and getting some kind of worthy return is if you're getting another point per game forward, which doesn't solve anything, or you're using him to offload one of those terrible deals, which then means you're getting less value in return for him. So it's just like a lose-lose trade no matter what.
Yeah, the value is in the money that you're getting back in your cap to bring in
Yeah.
other players.
Like,
Exactly.
unless you're trading him for Shea Theodore and you're committing to Travis Hamonic sitting in the AHL for the rest of his NHL contract. Like,
Yeah.
in that case, you're kind of like, hey, if we can get a stud defenseman, like, sure, why not? Like, we don't care what happens to Travis Hamonic in the AHL. We don't give a fuck. He's not doing anything for us.
Yeah.
But it's like, obviously, it's like Jim Rutherford. The whole, like, his whole thing is he's not stuck with any of these guys. Like,
None of them are his.
he didn't trade for JT Miller. He didn't draft and re-sign Bo Horvat. He didn't trade for Connor Garland. He didn't re-sign Tanner Pearson. He has no ties to any of these guys. So if he wants to go scorched earth and just be like, I'm getting as many firsts as I can, by all means, he can do it.
Yeah. Well, I will not, and you're right. Like that he doesn't have a lot of ties to these players. There is one guy he does have a tie to, Tanner Pearson, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh
and he's
God.
playing so good for it.
And he's actually playing
He's playing
okay.
like oh god, this guy traded me because I was bad last time. I need to
I really
really
need to
prove to
not.
him I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah, but yeah, with JT Miller, I mean, I do think that there is a scenario where he gets traded for like real value back. Like
Mhm.
you get the guy, like we talked a little bit, like not super joke, like somewhat jokingly about like Alexis Lafreniere last time.
Yeah.
But like there is like spots out there where it's like, okay, maybe you're not getting the best guy right now. Like maybe in the immediacy of where your team of where these two players are at, you're going to be getting the worst of the two. But
Mhm.
that player is younger by like 5 years. He's on he's on controllable RFA years that we didn't get with JT Miller. Like those are the kinds of things that would potentially later he will be the better player of the two. And that's kind of what you need to bank on
Yeah.
if you're going to get that value back. It's going to be a bit of a risk in the sense of you never know, like it might not pan
For
out,
sure.
but there are options out there where they can get that done.
Yeah.
And that being said, like maybe like you'll look at a case where it's like, well, I would like not having Oliver Ekman-Larsson's contract on the books for the next
Yeah.
6 years, so maybe we need to tie those two
Yeah.
together and send them to a different team. Like that
Yeah,
might be just how it goes.
maybe the win-win trade is you just trade JT Miller at 50% retained if it means some team taking on OEL's entire contract. Right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
like
God.
what if the deal is you're trading
You got to pick.
OEL. Yeah, like you're trading OEL and JT Miller to Arizona, and Arizona retains 50% of JT Miller while you
You
retain
give
50%,
you give them
and
back
you
OEL.
and you stick them back with OEL,
Oh, that'd
but
be so
they get
mean.
back a first round pick or whatever. Like, but then you're in the position of, well, we're spending to get rid of mistakes, and that's I don't know
Yeah, that
if
would
Jim Rutherford is in that boat. He might have to be doing his like call in old man favors, like, oh, remember when I was GM last time and I did this favor for you by taking Eric Goodbranson? Well, I need you to do this for me, Toronto,
yeah,
or
Jacob
whoever it was.
it would have it would have been Vancouver in that case. It
Oh
would have
yeah.
been or like it would have been Jim Benning who whenever he becomes the Edmonton's GM,
That's
whenever
true.
that
That's true.
happens.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
so
oh God,
maybe that's what happened. But
but
yeah,
there
point
are
is,
others there. Yeah,
yeah, Connor Garland, another name that got popped up. This one's like
that one's
almost
new.
sad because I mean, like we said, it's hard to get like upset about it because this is teams calling about players, and it's like I completely understand it. Connor Garland is not that young. He's on a very good deal. And realistically, if the Canucks brass think that with their current cap structure, they're not going to be competing through any of the years that Connor Garland is signed to their team, if teams are calling and willing to trade you like premium assets for him, like you can't be stuck with a roster that clearly has not worked over the last couple of years. Like Connor Garland's played really good. Like he's arguably been one of the team's like top two forwards. Like him and JT Miller are like interchangeable to me. But
Really? Okay.
yeah, like I think they've both played like unbelievably well for the Canucks. And the problem though is it's just about like the where the team views themselves. Like, are they in a contention window right now? Can they get back there in less than a year? Can they get there in less than 1 year? Like, I feel like it's a domino situation. You know what I mean? Like, they're hinging their entire plans on whether or not they can get a good return deal for JT Miller or if they can offload Oliver Ekman-Larsson or Tyler Myers. Because if you clear up close to $7 million in cap space, then it's like, oh, maybe we
Suddenly,
don't need to trade Miller or Garland at all, because
yeah.
now we have this oodles of cap space to find those $1 million guys who, play at a premium for us.
Yeah. And yeah, with Garland in particular, I think it really is the question of like you look at he's on the first of a 5-year deal where he's making less than $5 million a year. You
Hmm.
consider that's a bargain contract. Like
Yeah, for sure.
for all of Jim Benning's problems, that was a good contract.
That's Chris
The
Gear's final thank you to the
There you go.
organization for his years of hard work. Was
There
here's a contract you guys can probably trade for a coup if you really want to. Or you
Yeah,
can keep him and just be happy with what he offers you.
very true. And even at that point, though, the question does become like, okay, like you mentioned before, like where do they see themselves? It's does it align? Does the window match up with what we want here? And the example we've brought up before on the show has been Steve Yzerman trading Anthony Mantha like
Mm,
relatively early in his career to the Capitals because he was literally like, look, the timing doesn't align for what he's going to be with where we're at as a franchise right now. It would be
right.
silly of us to waste his prime years on a team that's not going to be very, very good when we
Mhm.
could trade him now for a lot more and get that value back sooner rather than later. And that's kind of what it's going to be with Connor Garland. Because at the end of the day, the question that with all these guys is almost going to be them asking the question, do we feel we're going to win a Stanley Cup while this guy is here? And if the
Yeah.
answer is no, then maybe that's when you have to start reevaluating and start going, well, then maybe we should start look at trading this guy sooner rather than later. And with Garland, he is in a spot where in theory, if everything fell perfectly in your favor, you could
Mhm.
keep him and he could be part of a cup contender down the line in this contract. 5
Yeah.
years is a lot of time,
Yeah.
but if you don't feel like it's there, then
Mhm.
trading him now while he's got a lot of time, he is arguably the player that you could get the most for out of all of them.
Yeah,
Because
because
yeah,
of that contract, because of his age, it's just like it's the question of, do you get more long term out of trading him, or do you get more by keeping him and hoping he develops more chemistry with Horvat and Pedersen? Like
yeah,
it's just the gambling game that they're really playing.
yeah,
Speaking of gambling, Tanner Pearson, like we were just talking about, like I think he's been playing really well under Bruce Boudreau. Like I think his points production's been there.
yeah.
Clearly a utility player. Like he can penalty kill. He's a power play guy. Probably playing scared shitless because he doesn't want Jim Rutherford to trade him again. Uh, Apparently teams are calling on him too, but like our notes say, he does have that no trade clause. I
Yeah.
can't imagine they'd trade him because of that. And I think
Yeah.
the only way you'd really be getting rid of him is if you retain salary, and if the team is really cap struck and they're trying to figure out ways around it.
Mhm.
I don't know if retaining money is necessarily the solution long term.
Yeah. That one's going to be the toughest I think he'd be the toughest to move if they so wanted to. I think it
Hmm.
was mentioned that they would like to in a perfect world like try and move him for assets, but it's just the contract that he's on plus the no you add the no trade in there as well. Like I think it's like a 7-team no trade. I think that was the if
Yeah.
I have that correctly. It's something along those lines. But overall, like that's where you're at with Tanner Pearson. I think I think Pearson would be a guy that probably is like you probably want to move rather like sooner rather
Oh, for
than
sure.
later
I didn't
because
want
of
to
his
resign
age.
him.
Yeah, well, it was a case of like I would be fine if he had come back on a much cheaper deal than the
Yes.
5 million he's getting
But
right now.
but they were desperate to
Or
re-sign
the
him to
sorry,
not
the
piss off the locker room, right? So it was kind of like a
3.25 or no, it is a million because he's just on non-roster right now because he's in COVID protocol.
yeah, but
But yeah,
it's a $3.25 million cap hit, which infamously Jim Benning
yeah,
said his
3.25.
agent said this is how much he could get on the open market, so we signed him to it, which is just like
Oh boy,
one of the many fireable quotes that he should have been fired for and
so
somehow
many.
didn't. Like just
It
such a
was like
fucking dingus. Like
it,
how
it's
does
like
that quote escape your mouth and you keep your job after? Like that's
it's
unbelievable.
it's like a cartoon, like where it's like there's no fluid timeline. He's Homer at the nuclear plant, just getting fired every single
Yeah,
episode, and then suddenly, oh, he's back. He's back doing the same job again. Like that's kind
pretty
of what it
much.
was.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought it was 5 million for some reason. No, 38.25, which is still too high, but
Still
like
still a bit steep for a
still,
28-year-old or
yeah,
29-year-old
especially
pushing
where they're
31.
at. But it's
Yeah.
not untradeable. But it is not. It's
You'd have
difficult.
to retain to make it worth like getting anything
You
valuable in return.
you'd have to retain and you'd have to find a team that's really needs like a middle six guy,
Yeah.
which usually if you're in the playoff hunt, you've already got, or if you're
Mhm.
not in the playoff hunt, you're not looking for. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird, he's in a weird spot where it's gonna like, yeah, trading him would be very difficult. Uh Literally, I think the only way that it could end up working out for them in that regard was if literally if some team finds out, oh, we have a major injury to to an important guy and he's done for the playoffs, or he's
Yeah.
not coming back until the playoffs. And then
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, suddenly we have the room to add and they can both play come playoff time. That's your one hope. So Tanner Pearson is a guy who I don't think you'll end up seeing move if like unless it gets down to the wire and a team suddenly gets very desperate for somebody that can fill that role.
Yeah. Other guys on the list, Luke Shen. I can see it. He's on a cheap deal, playing really
Yeah,
good with Quinn Hughes. Honestly, it'd be really funny if they traded him back to Tampa.
that would be funny, but also no, don't do that. Don't
Don't do
trade.
that
He
'cause
just
we like
scored. He just scored an
yeah,
empty net goal to win as part of the winner for the Canucks here.
hell
So
yeah. Good
don't
for him.
don't trade Luke Shen.
Yeah.
Also, like just in the sense of like they don't have a lot of right shot D.
Well,
Like
no, that's not
or
true. They have a lot of right shot D, but they're all interchangeable
and they're all not good.
and they're all not
Luke
good. So
Shen
it's
is the
like,
best one. Luke
yeah,
Shen's the
which
best one
is
out of all of them.
uh,
And it's like, okay, he's like
something is wrong when that is the case, right?
right. Like we said at the beginning of the year, right? Luke Shen is great. Luke Shen
Yeah,
82 games a year means there's something wrong, not with Luke Shen, with
yeah,
with the way you're running your system. He
yeah,
shouldn't be playing 82 games.
exactly. Yaroslav Halak played his
He
ninth game tonight. 10th
mhm,
game, he gets that overage bonus that will not move to the next team if he plays
mm,
for the Vancouver Canucks with his
mm,
10th game. So the clock's ticking. Do they like they got to basically shit or get off the pot if they want to avoid another cap issue down the road? Because right now they're trying to overhaul their team to try and strip away cap, and it doesn't make sense if you finally get rid of one deal just to add a $1.5 million bonus to next year's cap problems. So I
yeah.
think they should do it personally. The team
Yeah, they
isn't
should.
contending. Like you got to sell high while you still can. Same with
Yep.
Tyler Mott. Sell high. Like
Yep.
there's no point to holding on to guys that aren't going to be available to your cap window, especially like a Tyler Mott who, like, no offense, love the guy, love his journey, love what he has overcome to be where he's at.
Yeah.
But if a team is calling on him, you got to do it because you can't resign him to the Brandon Tanev 7-year, $2.5 million per year contract. Like he's
No.
like the way he plays is not going to age gracefully. And what you see now in him is what you're going to get, unfortunately. So if someone else is calling, if Tampa's calling, if someone else is calling, you're absolutely should just be like, yeah, sure
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Juho Lammikko and Matthew Highmark will survive without Tyler Mott.
Well, those are a couple other guys that frankly they should be looking at moving to.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Trade
like
them all.
that's also more in a sense of the doing the Moneyball thing where they just
Yeah. You
trade
just
them
trade
so
them
the
all for
coach
like the
can't
cheapest guys.
stop using them.
Yeah, exactly.
I am going to start Carlos Pena at first. No, you're not. He plays for Detroit now. So
Yeah.
no, you got to do that with Lammikko and
Despite
Highmore
trades is what they
real
need to
quick.
do. Yeah.
Like, I mean, one thing we haven't even touched on today is Vasily Podkolzin was a healthy scratch today, which
Yeah. That's a little
was
sus. We're
that
probably
is
gonna
very sus.
We're gonna
Like,
have to get into this probably at our next episode if he gets scratched again because that makes no sense to me. The
no, it makes
team,
zero sense.
like,
It's
really,
ridiculous.
you need Juho Lammikko in the lineup over him or
You need
Tyler Mott.
Alex
Like,
Jason in your lineup.
yeah,
I think he scored
ridiculous.
tonight, granted, but
Yeah, good
like,
for him, but like, I'm sorry, like Vasily Podkolzin needs the ice time. These
yeah,
guys don't. These guys are meaningless to the long term uh, implications of this team's roster, especially as we're talking about overhauling it. Like
yeah.
fucking 50% of this team is probably not going to be here next year. So
If they do
you
it
should be,
correctly,
if they
really,
do it
that's how
correctly,
it.
yeah, 50% of this team is probably not going to be back for next year, and it's going to be a completely new roster. So Vasily Podkolzin probably isn't one of the untouchables, but he shouldn't be so
He should.
not touchable that he's missing games for it. Like that's
Yeah,
insane.
he should 100% be playing. Like, again, it's like the thing we've brought up before with Höglander, where it's like, hey, this guy who's like high flying, high octane hockey player is not working on the fourth line. Why isn't that working? It's like,
Yeah.
because you need to play him in a better assignment. You need to put him
Yeah.
in a more important role than you're giving him.
Yeah.
And
You need
like,
to play
yeah,
him not with Jason Dickinson, who's not worked out in the slightest. Like,
that's another
speaking
guy they
of,
should be
if Jason
moving.
Dickinson's getting a call, you're saying yes to whatever it is. So provided you're not taking more cap in return, you're saying yes, because
Yeah.
it has not worked out for him. Another one of those guys where it's like you like who he is as a person. Like, I like his advocacy is really admirable, and it's the kind of guy you would want in your locker room, but just like for an on ice perspective, clearly
And
not there.
And if you were in theory, like if you were closer to where you are, like competing wise, you could make the argument of like, well, we can give it some time. And in theory, it
Uh-huh.
might work better with a
Yeah.
group that was a lot closer to where they are. But yeah, that fit's been weird and wonky. It's
And
it's it's a shame because it looked like it was going to be a very good fit and a
that
good, smart, like a clean move. But
it is very funny because it was like the moves lauded by the fan base were the acquisitions of Ekman Larson and Garland, and the one move that was praised was Jason Dickinson on a $2.65 million contract. It was a little high, but people loved his two-way value and the fact that he could be like an actual credible third line center for the team. And he's been so bad that they moved him to the wing because it's just not working for him, and they've had to move Miller, Horvat, Pedersen down the centers because it's just not working. Like,
yeah,
that's how bad it is. So yeah, sell him if you can. Um, just a couple more things before we wrap up with the NHL news. We'll go
we go to the
quickly.
interview. Do you want to go to the interview first? Like we could do that first if you want.
No, we'll close out with the interview. Let's do some
Okay.
NHL. Let's just do some quick NHL stuff because they announced some All-Star Game competitions. I'm sure you saw this.
Yes, I
I,
did.
I I told you about this before we recorded. I think they're gimmicky and goofy, but I love them at the same time because they're
Yep.
so stupid. But
So
I'm just tired of the whole Vegas. We have casinos. Did you know that type shit? Like, I'm
uh,
done with it.
I mean, to be fair, look, it's all they've got. What are you
I
gonna
know
go
it's
for? The scenery? It's
they
a
got
desert. No.
they got the salt flats.
Isn't
they
that Utah?
they got Burning Man,
They got Burning Man.
right?
Like we should just start mentioning they've got the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, they got a pyramid. Come on, they're a
They got a
worldly
pier.
city.
They got a pyramid that isn't just a Bass Pro Shop. Yeah. Yeah, no. So, okay. So here I'm going to read these out to you guys for anyone who hasn't heard them. They're like there's two new ones. So obviously there's the regular events. There's like the Duncan NHL save streak. I'm going to read them out with the sponsors cuz that's when they're funniest. The EA NHL hardest shot, the Adidas NHL breakaway challenge, which actually is coming back. That's the old one where they actually do creative things like the dunk contest and in the NBA. That one's fun. They haven't had that one for a while, so that one's coming back. And that's good. The Honda NHL accuracy shooting, and then there's the Verizon NHL fastest skater. Obviously, you know all those ones. Now,
Yeah.
the new ones. One of them is the Discover NHL Fountain Face Off.
Hell yeah.
So
What a name.
competition. What a name, and the picture is really cool too. I might pull it up while we're talking here, but competition takes place on the iconic Bellagio fountains. This is from the NHL press release. Players will travel by boat to the rink, to the quote in quotations rink, and are required to successfully shoot pucks into 5 targets in the least amount of time. And according to the picture, it's targets that are like like on the water. They're like floating targets. Qualifying players move to the head-to-head final. Fountain spray and the breeze off the strip will add to the challenge of this unprecedented NHL All-Star Skills event. So that's one of them. The other one is the Las Vegas NHL 21 and 22 event. Shutting down part of the Las Vegas Boulevard to hang a full deck of oversized cards on a rack puts a new twist on street hockey. 21 and 22 is a game of chance, strategy, and skill. The object of the game is to achieve a hand of 21, like blackjack, without going bust in the least number of shots. The player who wins 2 rounds is crowned Puck Shark. This is just it's okay. It's gimmicky. Like, for sure. It's a very gimmicky bit. I admit that fully. But honestly, for an event like All-Star Weekend, it kind of needs to be gimmicky. Like the whole thing needs to be kind of gimmicky because look, All-Star Weekend is often kind of a letdown in the general scheme of things, especially from a from a
From an
from an
everything avenue.
from an everything avenue. It's well, the way they always put it is it's really like it's not a made for TV event. It's really for the fans who go to the event because you get to see all
It's for
the players.
7-year-olds.
A little bit. 7-year-olds who have whose parents have like $1,000 to spend on All-Star tickets because they're
Yeah,
they're
they're not
routinely
cheap.
they're routinely more expensive than like even the Winter Classic or the outdoor games. Like
Yeah.
that's how it's wild. It is a little bit more of it's to bring the sponsors in to give them the prime seats and to see all the players and like the after parties and everything and whatnot. There's a lot more to it than just it's not about the TV, but I think at this thing, like this is the event where they should be embracing just the weirdest stuff and the stupid stuff a little bit more. And for this, it like for this works. Like, yeah, send them out in a boat in the middle of the Bellagio fountains. Like that's kind of cool. Like I'm kind of down for that.
It's extra AF, as they say.
It's extra AF, which is perfect for Vegas and perfect for All-Star Weekend, right?
This does make me like interested in like future All-Star games where like they'll kind of have like games or mini games themed to the host city.
That would be
Like,
good. Yeah.
like that's what I think the All-Star game needs is like just to switch up the variety by introducing like, oh, like in Vancouver, you're gonna do
what would
you're
Vancouver
gonna do a brewery and you're gonna have to
a
chug
brewery?
you're gonna have
Is
to
that
chug
it?
a bunch of
Well,
beer and then try and do a bunch of accuracy shots. Like I don't know, like
how
something
about
pertaining to the city.
how about they have to like shoot oh this is the question for the fans. Like maybe it's like this is send in your submissions on what your answer here. Maybe it's like what the Vancouver themed all-star events would be. Like how about like get them shooting pucks off of like Grouse Mountain onto like the gondola as it's like
Oh,
or something, just like look out below. Hopefully nobody's hanging out too close to the thing. You're like just trying to shoot it off the moving target. I'm trying to think what else Vancouver's would be. Like, yeah,
like something to do
something
with
with Grouse
Whistler.
Mountain would be cool. Something, yeah, Whistler maybe. Like, I'm trying. Can you like something in like
Bring
Granville Island maybe?
you know the Red Bull Crashed Ice series where they skate
Yes.
downhill. Do that, but grouse grind.
See, I would love them to add that kind of a competition to the All-Star Weekend. I'm surprised that hasn't been done already. I kind of know why, because
we know why.
injuries.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't
a
want
bunch of
anybody
blown
getting
out
injured.
knees.
Yeah, 100%. There's got to be some good. Oh my God, you know what it is now? You know what it is? It's who can shoot as many pucks into the barge hanging out.
Oh fuck yeah! There we go.
There you go. The barge chilling competition. Can you shoot it from one end to the like one end over like over the bridge or something, Cambie Street Bridge into the freaking barge? That would be sick. That'd be sick. Be down
I can
for that.
absolutely get on board with that. But yeah, that would be pretty hype. I'm not gonna lie. All right. Other than that, we've got this actually blew my brain when you mentioned this in our Twitter DM exchange when you're like, "Do you know that the Olympics begin this week?" And I was like, "What?"
Yeah, it snuck up on me too. I heard it like the other day. They're like the Olympics in a couple days. I'm like, wait, what do you mean?
Like,
no, they're not.
what?
Yeah, nope. They start Wednesday.
Yeah,
which is
you know what's funny
wild.
is because like I think I saw like a tweet or something on Saturday or Sunday or maybe it was like last week even when it was like oh, team so and so is flying out to Beijing right now, wish us luck. And in my head I was like, why are you going so early? Isn't it like months away? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
This is like 2 weeks from now. It's like, oh
yeah. And I think the reason why that happened for all of us is particularly because when the NHL players, like when it was announced the NHL players weren't going to go, we kind of just all mentally wrote it off. Like we're like, well, oh well, because we're not like clearly we're going to be, you know, what was originally going to be like, oh, there's no NHL right now because they're all on break. So we're going to be watching the Olympics every single day. Now it's going to be happening at the same time as NHL games. Yeah. So for us, our attention is still more or less going to be on what the Canucks are doing every single week rather than Team Canada with who's even on the team, like Team Canada for the men's team now. It's I think it got leaked originally.
Owen Power.
Owen
Eric
Power.
Stahl.
Eric Stahl. There's a Canuck on there. There's a former Canuck on there for sure.
There's a Tambellini on there.
Is Adam Cracknell? Is he on this one?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
That is the one. There we go. Yeah. Adam Cracknell. That's right.
Yeah.
Legend.
There's some more. We'll do more research and advise people
as
when
we get
the Olympics actually start going.
Yeah. The women's games start the soonest. So they start on what is technically like day -2 or whatever. Like they're before
because they start ahead of the ceremonies for some reason.
Which let me just say that's weird. I don't get that. Why not just why would you start any events
ceremonies earlier?
Yeah, like in what universe is that possibly like? Do you need to like have events start early in like when it's an arbitrary calendar that you can just have the opening ceremonies first? Like, that makes zero sense. And so you're gonna, you're gonna have the women's team starting early. I believe I have the calendar actually. Like I had it uploaded into like my Google Calendar, like with the correct times for where we're at. So like the first games are on Wednesday at like 9 p.m. Canada plays at 9:10 against Switzerland. They're for the first game of the women's tournament.
That's not bad.
We'll be paying. So like, it's in a time zone that like more or less you can stay up to watch most of them.
Yeah.
But like some of them are like there's like one USA game at like, or there's like Denmark Japan is getting buried at like 1:40 in the morning, right? Like so. There are those ones like, but yeah, as far as the women's tournament is concerned, I'll be paying attention to that for sure. Like Canada and their quest for gold, because that's the thing. But like the men's tournament, again, it's another year where it's like, I really don't care. Although there was the other interesting thing. I don't know if you heard this, but speaking of Chicago, like Chicago connections, Jeremy Colleton, who was the coach of the Blackhawks up until recently.
He's replacing Claude Julien,
who apparently broke his ribs. Like during a practice or something, and cannot make the flight to China now. So he had to like bow out, which brutal. Like Jesus, what a brutal like thing.
That's some bad luck there.
That is some awful luck. Like, good Lord, what a bad string. Like already the Canadian men's team is starting off in a bad, like with some bad juju. The women's team much better. They're going to be contending for an actual gold medal. I don't know enough about the American team to really say, like, because it often comes down to one of those two. Like, I would say I think Canada this year has the edge, at least on my like to believe they do. Like they have some younger people coming in who weren't there, I think, in the last Olympics. And I remember watching that women's gold medal game the last time and there were points in that game like where Canada was just hanging on for dear life because of like clearly because their group was mostly older players, whereas the Americans had a lot of younger reinforcements on their group that they didn't have in 2014. Canada's in a different spot this time where it's not so much of it's not as nearly as veteran laden as the first group was. There's a lot more younger, like the next generation of women's players has come through. And we'll probably have we'll probably have to have like someone who knows more about the women's game, like to come on and talk about it during the Olympics, because it's going to be a good tournament from that regard for sure.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea to have someone that actually knows what they're talking about, you know? Well, speaking of having people that know what they're talking about, we got the guest for you?
We have a guest.
We do. Our first little bit of interviewing prowess where we actually, do like host stuff, which is, probably something we should have been doing for a while, but we're going to try and do this some more. Maybe we'll get someone on to talk about the women's Olympic team. But for now, why don't you listen to an interview we pre-recorded ahead of time with Duane Steinel. That name might be familiar to you folks. He famously called into a Buffalo radio show 2 years ago, the day of Dominic Hasek's birthday, 2 years ago today, actually.
Yeah.
And let them know his opinions on the current status of the Buffalo Sabres and the ownership group by the Terry and Kim Pegula. Check that out. It's funny. It's fucking hilarious. Got him some airtime in Vancouver radio
Yeah.
across the world practically.
You know what's wild, Cody, is that like I didn't realize how long it had been since that that radio call, but like that was actually one of the first, like one of the very first episodes of this show before you got here was talking about that. Like
Hell
that, I think that was literally like I want to say even like maybe like episode like 6 or 7, like real early in my show's tenure. I think I had just met, like, I was like January of that year. Like I just met Faber for the first time, even like, cause he came in before I recorded that episode. I remember that.
Hell yeah.
It was wild. And it's wild looking back on it now. Now we have him on the podcast talking about the Sabres, talking about their goaltending future, a future without Jack Eichel. Like we get into a lot of topics in it. It's great.
Yeah. So listen to that, and then we'll see you guys on the other side. All right, folks. Welcome to our first interview together. This is Lachlan and I's first real official interview. It's the first time for everything. We're going to blow it. I can't wait. It's going to be so awful. But joining us today, you may have heard about him some time ago. I don't even know when. We'll get to ask him about this. But it is Duane Steinel from the Two Goalies, One Mic podcast. And Duane, you've been chomping at the bit to get on the podcast for quite some time because I don't know if you know this, but for whatever reason, Lachlan and I are big homers for Buffalo. We share the pain. We're painful franchises with a sordid history of misery and sadness. And to add to that sadness, Lachlan has done something very unforgivable that we were talking beforehand. And that is the jersey choice he decided to put on his wall beforehand. So what are your thoughts on this jersey?
I have not. This is the first time I've seen the Turdberger jersey. I'd say in at least 5 years. Because
really,
even people in Buffalo don't wear it, man. It's just that terrible. It's like a roller hockey jersey. Like
I find that shocking. Like just in the general sense of like here in Vancouver, right? Like we have the long weird history with jerseys. Like even today, like you'll see somebody with what were referred to as the vomit flying skate jerseys, where it was yellow and it had the skate logo on, like in the late 80s, right?
Still not as bad as that.
For sure. And that. So what he's pointing to, for anyone who's not watching the video version, I have the infamous Turdberger jersey from that the Sabres wore, I believe, for 2 years in like the mid 2010s. It definitely was there during Ryan Miller's last season in Buffalo, and it was the only jersey Sabres jersey I could find for specifically with Ryan Miller on it for under like $50, which is all I had when he retired.
I mean,
and
he played for the Canucks. Why don't you just get a Canucks jersey?
Because I don't get
those years for the Canucks were so bad that it's just rude. You want to remember Miller at his peak, at his best, and that was when he was with Buffalo.
Exactly.
Before the wheels fell off. But speaking of the wheels falling off, we are having you on because both the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks are kind of free falling. The Buffalo, obviously, the Sabres have been kind of free falling most of the season. They had a little bit of a jump, a little pep in their step early. They're looking like they're having fun. Kyle Okposo was scoring like every single game for some reason. Jeff Skinner was looking like he was having fun again, remembered his love of the game. Tage Thompson decided to become a number one center for some reason. So, Duane, that's why we wanted to have you on, because we've also got some, speaking of jersey news, we actually have some stuff about the Buffalo Sabres. So we wanted to have you on and just ask you, as a man fully embracing the pain of the Buffalo Sabres franchise, just what's going on right now? We saw recently they were down to 0 goalies. What happened there?
Oh, God. I mean, yeah, it was it like 3 days ago, we got that news that Michael Hauser was entering the COVID protocol. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we weren't even sure. We were told that Craig Anderson would be the backup for that particular game, that he wasn't quite ready to start in goal, but he would at least serve as the backup. And then you get that news that Michael Hauser was entering COVID protocol. And just like we were kind of just throwing our hands, and they're like, "Who's gonna play goalie, man?" Like we're already on like our 7th goaltender this year. I think 7. It's Anderson, Tokarski, Dell, UPL, Anderson, Tokarski,
Subban.
Dell,
Malcolm
UPL, Subban.
Aaron Dell.
It would have been our 7th goaltender. We're barely halfway to the season. If we started a new goaltender.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. We did between Dominic Hasek and Ryan Miller, the bridge between them two. I don't think we even had 6 goalies dressed in those years. In different goaltenders. I'm very interested to see the number of goaltenders Buffalo has dressed since trading Ryan Miller to St. Louis all those years ago. But Craig Anderson came in, played very well, made 27 saves in his first time playing in 32 games. It was like I said, a very good performance from him. Tokarski served as the backup, but I'm not sure what their plan is going forward, if they're going to just continue to try and ride those two as their top 2 goaltenders, or if they're going to once again try and make another move for a goalie, because Malcolm Subban's out for the season. I haven't seen any timetable on UPL coming back, but I think if UPL does come back, that he would go right back to Rochester to help them chase a Calder Cup, which I think is the most important thing for them to do, because I think this season was about individual development. It wasn't about chasing a playoff spot this year. Any Sabres fan who thought that we had a chance at that, honestly, are delusional. But I was fully prepared to just watch these young players get more opportunity, and you've seen players like Tage Thompson really take it in stride, he's already matched his career totals in points and goals. I know he was part of the last man in ballot for the All-Star Game.
Oh yeah.
I know he didn't get it, but I know he was a part of that and well deserving. Obviously Rasmus Dahlin is the Buffalo's representative at the All-Star Game this year. Also, in my opinion, deserving. I think he's going, considering to what he was under Ralph Kruger, which, in my opinion, he was absolutely neutered by Ralph Kruger amongst a lot of other players. I mean, Ralph had Jeff Skinner on his 4th line for 2 years. Like, I don't know what Jeff Skinner ever did to that guy to deserve the way he was treated, but he took a guy who scored 40 goals on Jack Eichel's wing and put him on the 3rd and 4th line. It made no sense at all. And then he would absolutely go kind of take shots at him in the media. Just said, well, for a guy who measures himself on, goals and this and that, kind of insinuating that, there's more to his game, or you should be talking more about Jeff Skinner's game than scoring goals. I'm like, well, that's all he's really ever done in his career is score goals, Ralph. Yeah. So, I mean, we do kind of measure the guy you paid over $9 million a season to score goals when he's not scoring goals. Like, it never made sense. Stick to soccer, buddy. But it's been an up and down season. Glad to have Craig back. Trade deadline's about a month away, and you made mention of that. What people might or may not know. That was actually the 2-year anniversary of that phone call into the radio station was like 3 days ago.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
actually on Dominic Hasek's birthday. I remember specifically because.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, it was because there was some talk about it, joking about it. I was like, I'm surprised they remember to wish Hasek a happy birthday. And I remember reading that going into that call. I'm like, yeah, this organization is so dysfunctional that, it is surprising when they do remember players' birthdays.
And so to your obviously 2 years ago, so how do you think the direction of the organization has changed since that, famous phone call, made the world news, basically? In your opinion, do you think the Buffalo Sabres have made strides or steps in the right direction finally?
It's hard to say that your team has made steps in the right direction when you're just getting off an offseason where you traded Jack Eichel.
Yeah.
And as good as Alex Tuch and Peyton Krebs have looked so far, that's still pennies on the dollar for what what Jack Eichel is worth when he's 100% healthy, which obviously he wasn't. That was just like an ongoing, it was like a soap opera all off season. I was more on the side of the player because I don't think any governing body should have a say in, what treatment you get for, it's your body at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I get it. It's in the NHLPA's agreement. So I understood both sides of the fence, Buffalo's and Jack Eichel side. I get it. It's a $10 million a year investment you got in a player, and if things don't go right, and just, say, God forbid he's forced to retire because something didn't go right with this surgery, then you're on the hook for his entire contract. But at the other side, it is his body. He should be able to say in the surgery he gets. But the direction of the team, again, if you just focus on individual player development, it's trending in the right direction. Again, I mentioned Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, Peyton Krebs looks very good. I think Alex Tuch is on pace to be. I know it's either 8 points in his first 7 games as a Sabre or 9 points in his first 8 games, one of those two. But I view him as the next captain of this team. It's hard to believe that you'd have a guy get traded from a Cup favorite to the worst team in the NHL and see a smile on his face. But that guy was so excited to be here because he grew up in the area. He grew up a Sabres fan. You saw all the pictures of him wearing Sabres jerseys, him at Sabres games, meeting certain players. This guy is what this team, really down to its core, pre-Pagula era, really what we identified with. Players like Alex Tuch, guys are going to go out there and leave it all out on the ice, and that's what he is. And, things are, I think, turning in the right direction with the players that you'd expect. You want to see develop more. The only guy that I'm not going to say I'm disappointed in, but, I'm left wanting more right now is Casey Middlestat, but it's not his fault. It's more or less, the injuries. He just can't he's injured again. Well, he's taken out last night's game as a precaution, but he has not been able to stay healthy. So
yeah,
I think he's probably your best two-way forward as of right now, next to Alex Tuch. And we've had him for maybe a total of 5 games this season so far.
Yeah, I think he's had last time I checked, he had 2 points in 7 games or something.
Yeah,
he's just super snake bitten this year.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then. So Peyton Krebs, obviously, he spent some time with the AHL affiliate, and the Rochester Americans have been unstoppable this year, which is kind of surprising because last year they were, not that great. The year before they weren't that great either. But the Buffalo Sabres have something like 4 or 5 guys from recent, 2 of the last draft picks coming in and being a point per game player in the AHL. Is there anyone from that team you're hoping gets a look this year? I don't know if John Peterka has gotten any looks yet in the NHL.
Yes, he has played a few games and he's looked good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say NHL ready, but he's on his. I know he's played very well for Rochester. But I would expect him to really push for a spot on this team next season. Jack Quinn too. When the games Jack Quinn did play in here before, again, getting hurt and being out week to week, he looks phenomenal. He's everything is advertised. I know, myself included, we were really skeptical. I say the word about that pick at 8th overall. With Marco Rossi sitting there, you needed center ice depth, and they decided to go with the scoring winger. And but now after playing a full season, worth of games in Rochester, he's as advertised. He's a finisher. He's a goal scorer. The guy has a great shot, and he showed that here in Buffalo. I think for a few of the games he did play up with the big club, I think he led for a few of those games in shots on goal. He's not afraid to shoot the puck, and that's what you want from a kid like him, a guy who's gonna grip and rip. And he's I think he's as advertised. I think he's going to be a very, very good hockey player for this franchise for years to come. And other names too. I know right now he's up with us right now. He spent most of the time at Rochester. Matthias Samuelsson. He's been phenomenal. I think he's been a very calming presence in the back end. When you look at, I think he's a left-handed shot defenseman.
Yeah,
he really solidifies us at that position. I think it's our left-handed shot defenseman would be Dahlin, Samuelsson, and I forget who the third left-handed shot defense would be, but he really helps solidify us at least on that third pairing. And these kids that you want to watch develop, he's been doing very well. And then let's not forget Owen Power. Could, depending on how things go, with after the Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament, he could sign his contract right then and there. Maybe play it for a few games for Buffalo at the end of the season. I would fully expect him to be on this team at the start of next year. I don't see him. I mean, I don't really understand what he would prove staying in college for another season. So, I think he would make his debut with Buffalo at the end of the season or start the year next year.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the goaltenders, you mentioned UPL. For anyone who doesn't know, that is the incredibly named Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, great young goaltender. Is he seen as kind of like the next goalie for the franchise in terms of like development wise, or are they still kind of looking for that next like stable guy in net?
Oh, we're always looking. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I would say. At the start of last season, the ceiling was very high for him. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's had double hip surgery already. He's hurt again. He got hurt at the end of last season. A kid as young as him who has already had so many issues with his hips, especially, and who's played goaltender, knows that like your hips are so crucial to your game. You know, the way you shift your weight side to side in and out of your butterfly, like it. You have to have strong, healthy hips, and he's already dealt with all these issues, lower body issues already so early in his career. But two guys I personally think are the future of this franchise in net. Michigan University, Eric Portillo, having his first full year starting in college hockey. He's having a great year. I think has 2 shutouts, and I think he's got like a 9, maybe close to a 915, 920 save percentage. Playing in the Big Ten, which, isn't, it's a tough conference to play in.
Mm-hmm.
And Devin Levi for, I think it's Northwestern. Northwestern.
Northeastern.
Sorry, Northeastern. I know he just got selected to represent Team Canada at the Olympics. Big honor for him. He's having a unbelievable year for Northeastern. The only thing that worries with him is his size. He's like 6 foot. On a good day. And you don't really see goaltenders under 6'2" really get looked at in the NHL anymore. I know you have Saros out of Nashville who's on the smaller side, and he's made it work. So I hope Devin Levi is another example of a guy who on the smaller side can make it work in the NHL. But we'll see. He has numbers very close to what Ryan Miller had when he won the Hobie Baker Award with Michigan State. Like if you take a look at his numbers right now, they're like, wow.
They're pretty legit, yeah.
Yeah, he might.
We were looking at him ahead before calling you on. We couldn't believe it. 155 goals against average, 948 save percentage. At one point, I think he was like undefeated, like 16-2-1 at one point. Like it's just ridiculous the numbers he's putting out.
Insanely good season. People when we made that trade with Florida for Sam Reinhart, with the first round pick and Devin Levi. People, including myself, is like, Devin Levi, he's a good goaltender, a good prospect, but, was he worth Sam Reinhart right now? Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. For a team that struggled to find stability in net, I would say so. But right now, if you were to ask me, and this is not a shot against Devin Levi, because I think he's an unbelievable athlete who is more than capable of playing the NHL. But if you were to ask me who the future of the franchise, I would say Eric Portillo. You can't teach size. You really can't. And he takes up a lot of net, and he's like super athletic. And he's just going to keep getting better. And he's never really had any issues with his health, knock on wood. Never had any issues with his health. So I would, if I were a betting man, I would say Eric Portillo just because of his athleticism and size combination.
Fair.
Yeah. And with the short and you mentioned like the short goaltenders. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's been something that's kind of changing, which is nice, especially for Devin Levi, if he gets his opportunity. Like you mentioned Saros, Alex Nedeljkovic, same situation, a smaller guy. Like that's something that's added. You can't teach size, that's for sure. But hopefully for Levi, he brings the athleticism with that comes with sometimes being one of the smaller guys. As far as like Jack Eichel is concerned, obviously that kind of overshadowed a lot of last season for the Sabres, and obviously it gets done eventually during this year. And it's kind of hard to say like how people feel about Jack Eichel right in this exact moment, considering he hasn't played since. There has been no real development in terms of what he might do in Vegas. That could change entirely in the next little while, just in terms of what that team has to do to get him on their books even. As far as like the reception with him and like his legacy in Buffalo, how do people feel about Jack Eichel right now if you asked other Sabres fans about it?
I would say it's 50-50. There are a lot of fans here that do take the side of Jack just because, for the reason I said, man, like the kid was in pain. It's his neck. It's not something you screw around with. You know, sitting at home, being forced to sit, again, you should be able to have a say in the surgery you get. I get it's the way it's worded in NFL, in the CBA, that, the team has final say on decisions like that, but I just don't think that's right. And I think you could see a change, depending on what the players would be willing to sacrifice in the next CBA negotiations. Because I know to get that right back, they'll probably have to be flexible somewhere else in the CBA. But I can't imagine that after seeing everything that Jack Eichel was kind of forced to go. They've seen how like outspoken a guy like Robin Leonard was on Eichel's behalf. I would find it hard to believe that there weren't changes made to that. But I think it was very 50-50, maybe 60-40, that, people didn't blame Jack. I didn't blame him at all. I understood. It's your health. It's your neck. You only get one neck.
Yes,
my stepmother has had a couple neck fusion surgeries, which is the procedure Buffalo wanted, the fusion instead of the disc replacement, the ADR. And, she's had to have a couple of them, and she's dealt with some pain over the years. And Jack's like, what, 24 years old, 25 years old?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want to deal with that this early in life. He just wants to have, get this done over with, have a clean bill of health, play hockey, and have a life, a better quality life, during and after hockey, which I don't blame him for.
Sure.
I will say this, that if my predictions, because this is Buffalo and, this hockey team, you find me more cursed hockey team than the Buffalo Sabres. You just can't. I'm sorry, you can't. I don't care what people say about Toronto Maple Leafs. They've at least won a cup. All right.
Toronto says that, but they're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not since 1967. Sure. But, I don't know what, man, like they are, we've made losing an art form in Buffalo. It's just, we like the headline, we're a punchline and it sucks. But, for me, it's
oh no!
I just know what's gonna happen, man. He's gonna come back. He's gonna be healthy. He's gonna go on an absolute tear. They're gonna win the cup, and he's gonna win the Conn Smythe. It's gonna be Ryan O'Reilly all over again, and this city's gonna have an absolute stroke. They're gonna have a stroke, and people are gonna point the fingers at the Goalies, rightfully so. They should. I personally don't put as much blame on Kevin Adams because I personally think Kevin Adams was brought in to be a yes man. This guy was coaching like 10 or 12 youth 3 years ago, and now he's a general manager in the NHL. Tell me how that makes sense. Tell me how it makes sense. It doesn't, does it? It doesn't.
Is he well connected, or what's the read on him?
He's worked for the Pagulas for a while, but if you look at other, like the journeys other general managers in the NHL have taken, and then look at Kevin Adams, it's like,
it's weird. It's unorthodox. I've seen it. You were
coaching travel hockey like a couple of years ago, and now you're general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. Tell me how this makes sense at all. Not saying I'm not going to criticize the job he's done because he's made some pretty good moves, but I really do believe, and many others believe this too, that he was brought in to be a yes man. He's not going to say no to the Pagulas whenever they say something. After the Pat LaFontaine debacle years ago, where there was a lot of hearsay of what happened, but pretty much it's the story is that him and Kim Pegula butted heads when he was president of hockey operations, and they fired him. Fired an absolute icon for this organization. His numbers retired by the team. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Very well respected alumni. He wants nothing to do with the team anymore. And ever since then, they're very cautious with who they trust. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say Kevin Adams isn't going to be the guy that he can't right the ship. He's done a good job so far, but was he qualified for the job? Absolutely not. No way. And you look at the rest of that coaching staff alongside Don Granato. You got Matt Ellis as an assistant coach on the bench. Why? What has this guy done to deserve to be an assistant coach in the NHL? That makes no sense. Like you look at guys in Arizona, Andre Turigny. He put his time in to become a head coach of the NHL. He was an assistant with Colorado, and I forget with another team too. Coached how many years with Team Canada in the World Juniors and stuff like that, and finally got the call from Arizona to be a head coach. Guy put his time in. Matt Ellis just retired like 2 years ago as he was a fourth liner in the NHL. Now he's an assistant coach in the NHL. Tell me how that makes sense. Just I don't understand it. And again, I'm not trying to take shots at these guys, but like these guys haven't paid their dues. They just haven't. And I don't know. I just I'm very indifferent if coaching wise. It's no joke. This team has been actively shopped. They are for sale. I do know that they are trying to sell a percentage of the team, not the team as a whole. I do know that the Goalies want to keep a majority share of the team, but if that's the case, then for me, well, you better start hiring hockey people to make hockey decisions because you now have other people to answer for, depending on who buys this large amount of the team. Because I know they're hemorrhaging money, like hemorrhaging through money. It's bad. So I know they've sold off a lot of their business interests in downtown Buffalo. There's a restaurant that was called 716 that was connected to the arena that has now been sold to a brewery. The Goalies no longer have any interest in that restaurant, along so much of other things. And they used COVID as a reason to fire like a massive amount of people.
Yeah.
They've been liquidating since the start of this. And I think it's just a matter of time before you see them sell at least a portion of this team to somebody.
I think wasn't it the Bakulas that you were telling me, Lachlan, that they had put a halt on the construction of their super yacht during COVID?
That's right. And in fact, it actually I think it just finished. It was and not even just just a super yacht, their second super yacht, unless I'm mistaken.
Oh, it's finished. They finished it.
I believe they finished it. I believe I saw somebody recently talk about. I know those poor people. Like they
whatever
living on their
do.
super yacht. I mean, look, it's hard. You can escape criticism when you're out at sea, right? Like that's how it looks. That's how it goes.
No cell service out there, huh?
No cell service, so you can't hear it. Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of talk of like, oh, Buffalo and Arizona are like the two teams going for like Shane Wright kind of thing. Like it was that whole idea of like, oh, these are the two groups that are gonna be just tanking immensely to go after Shane Wright in the first overall pick. Buffalo is like, obviously they're not having a great year. They're not having a great year, but they're also like not one of the worst teams. In fact, not even in their own division. Like Montreal, those guys, I don't know how they managed to do it, but they have been awful, like just awful, like without trying even, which makes it even worse to a degree.
Let's be real. Montreal was only in the finals, even in the playoffs last year, because they played an extremely weak North Division, Canadian Division. Like, they don't even even with Carey Price playing as well as he can, like that team doesn't even come close to the playoffs, man. Like
they were the beneficiaries of some of the most spectacular collapses we've ever seen in NHL history, with Toronto being Vegas up and losing, getting reverse swept, Vegas just like losing the plot, like unbelievable circumstances to get them to get to a series against Tampa.
Scheifele deciding to take a guy's head off in the first game of a series, like
that was brutal.
Yeah. Like they definitely got the beneficiary, and like this year they've gotten absolutely none of it. Like to like even just like the curse came back to haunt them a little bit, where it was like now everybody's injured.
Yeah, they're gonna be for sale, fire sale out of Montreal. Come trade them. You have to. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna be able to get rid of that Carey Price contract unless you're willing to eat a lot of it. But fire sale.
I mean, if anything, the one argument you might be able to get if you're their management is like, well, we've clearly proven that he's worth the $11 million because he was clearly holding this team together entirely on his own. Because those, like, I feel so bad for Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault and all of their goaltenders. I'm like, God, they're fine goaltenders on a normal team, but they're not Carey Price for the Canadians, and that's why they're having such a hard time. But it's like Buffalo.
It's much like this guy when he played for Buffalo, Dominic Hasek. He had an average at best team in front of him, and he really carried them on his shoulders for years. I mean, I think he would have won the Vezina Trophy 7 years in a row if it wasn't for that random year from Jim Carrey in Washington where it was a one-hit wonder and
decided to be a boss. Yeah.
He decided to take a break from filming The Mask to go wear a goalie mask. Yeah, exactly. But like with Buffalo, where they're at in the standings right now, like, is there any sort of like disappointment in the sense of like, oh, we put all this time and effort into not being super fantastic this year and developing, and now we might not even get close to the best odds? Or are people just happy that they're winning more games than usual right now?
I think in spurts, not consistently, but I think people have been really just happy that hockey has been fun to watch again. Even if they're not winning, like the team is performing well to an extent, whereas it isn't unwatchable all the time, like it was last season under Ralph Kruger, where it was absolutely unwatchable hockey, man. Like unwatchable. And we had a few games here and there like that this season. But, I mean, look at how many of these guys on this roster are still going to be here next year. 6, 7 total, maybe. Like, they're all gone. A lot of guys I wouldn't expect to be either A, on the Sabres, or B, even in the NHL next year. And I would, honest to God, the one guy I think that they should really look to move, even though I think he's still playing hurt right now and he's battling through an injury, and guy has an unbelievable shot, power play specialist, but for me, he's only a perimeter player. Plays well on the perimeter. He doesn't get in front of the net and score goals kind of like the way Jeff Skinner does, is Victor Olofsson. And I think that if that guy can start scoring a few goals over the next month and really up his value, because this is the last year of his deal, but he's still an RFA. And I think there are teams that are making a playoff push that could really value secondary scoring. I personally, it made sense for me to see them to call a team like Edmonton, who's really struggling to find answers right now. I know they've won a few games in a row and they're playing well right now. But I mean, in my opinion, if they're willing to go out and make a deal for bring in Evander Kane, if they're that desperate, maybe they're desperate and willing enough to give up a first round pick for a guy like Victor Olofsson, who is, honest to God, when he's healthy, and I don't think he is right now, he has the potential with the right center to score 30 goals a season.
Yeah, he's got an unreal shot. I could not believe when I saw his stat line that he only had 5 this season. I was stunned. I had no idea. So that's insane. Last one here. Might as well, since we started this off with Jersey talk, we got to end up with some Jersey talk. The Buffalo Head is rumored to be coming back for, I think, reverse retro or as a third. What was the deal?
I think it's a third.
Yeah, third jersey.
Yeah. I hope so. I really do, man. That's my opinion. That's the best jersey they ever wore. I love the blue and gold. Don't get me wrong, but for me, it's all about the goat head jersey. Right here. As I bring it up right here.
There it is. There.
That's what we're talking about.
And I, that was my childhood, man. I've had a lot of great times, at Sabres games, watching them play in that sweater. And I can't wait, man. I might bankrupt myself buying certain players' jerseys. I'll definitely buy an Alex Tuch jersey. He's signed for a while, but I'll wait till they throw a C on his chest, because I think that's the next captain of your team. And that would be the next jersey I'd invest my money into after getting a Jack Eichel jersey for Christmas. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I mean,
not the Fanatics one. I got the Adidas one that cost over $200. And
hell yeah.
Yeah, it's I won't invest my own money anymore. But if I were to, it would definitely be an Alex Tuch jersey when they decide to give him the C.
Hell yeah, man.
I'll tell you what, Duane. I think I'm gonna end up getting probably one of those goat head jerseys. I've never been like, I will say I like their blue and gold. I last year, especially when they did the reverse retro and they had the goat head on the shoulder patch in the blue and gold, I was like, oh, they should try that at some point as a uniform. But obviously the colors and everything, it matches. Like, well, obviously here in Vancouver, we have that with the flying skate for the generation like before myself. But like, I'll tell you what, like, I will probably end up getting one of those jerseys either with like Ryan Miller or with Dominic Hasek on it. Probably Miller more so.
Hasek. Are you kidding me?
See, for me though, but I grew up with Miller, and Miller was one of my favorite goalies growing up.
Hasek's the greatest to ever do it.
Hasek is the greatest to ever do it. I
I appreciate
100%
hearing
on board.
Canadians say that too, because I get into a lot of arguments about Waugh, about Brodeur, and it's like,
no, God, no.
Sorry, like
this is firmly an anti Patrick Waugh, Marty Brodeur podcast. We're
the
pro
best
Hasek here.
Pro Hasek, and as far as Canadian goalies are concerned, obviously we're pro Luongo. Like that's the guy.
Yeah.
Hasek
I love Luongo, but my only issue with him is he had trouble. Granted, he only had one opportunity in the finals, but it just seems he wasn't willing to perform in the. I know it's a touchy subject. I know it's a touchy. You can say
I
the same about
completely
Hasek
agree.
with Buffalo.
Yeah,
I completely agree with Duane. Lachlan is clearly in the wrong. Luongo is garbage. And,
he was not the reason that they scored a record low amount of goals.
No,
Luongo
is a Hall of Famer.
He had 2 shutouts.
He's a Hall of Famer, but I think when push came to shove, sometimes you need your goalies to make a few saves, and he just didn't. But I love Luongo. I'm not saying
2 shutouts in the final. But like what,
Lachlan, this seems like it's a sensitive subject to you.
Well,
so
this is a very sensitive subject.
As a goalie, man, I focus on their games a lot, and he let in a few muffins.
He did. I agree. And I'm just saying he cost
a goalie
them the
his
cup.
caliber. You need those guys to make that save. But this is a guy who is very pro Luongo, very pro Luongo. I love that he went back to Florida to end his career. Where it all started for him. But I'm a very pro Roberto Luongo. But that would be my only knock on him is, you can make the highlight reel saves all you want, but when push comes to shove, and you can say this about Hasek, the very last shot he faced against in a Buffalo Sabres jersey was against Darius Kasparaitis. I think it was Game 7 of the conference finals on a team that, honestly, if they made it to the finals, they would have steamrolled whoever it was that won that year. And it was a muffin, an absolute muffin that got between Hasek's arm. But again, he was also like 36 years old.
Yeah.
I can't blame him too much for that, but at the same time, it was a muffin, and that's a sour way for the greatest player to ever wear your team's jersey, to go out. That sucked.
At least he got to make at least in his final appearance, he actually got to make a few saves, whereas Luongo got sent to the bench by John Tortorella in his final game.
Torts.
He taught him a lesson. Okay.
He taught him, goddamn.
Here's my argument for Dominik Hasek. Everyone wants to argue with me. You look at the ages that guys like Brodeur and Waugh came in the league, and were between 18 and 20 years old. Dominik Hasek didn't even know he was drafted until like 3 months later.
That's right.
You know what I mean? He didn't become a full-time starter in the NHL until he was 26. He was the number 1 rated goaltender in all of Europe. When he was coming up into his draft year or whatever it was. And the political climate in this country, they couldn't get over here. I mean, if you ever get a chance, look at the story about how we had to sneak over Alexander Mogilny. It's absolutely, honest to God, your listeners, you yourselves, go find this story. It is nuts. I have
seen the documentary. It's incredible.
It's nuts how they snuck him over. And it was insane. Like, they legitimately, like, I want to say it might have been Don Luce that went over for Buffalo, the rep. And like, it was like they had like the KGB after him. It was wild. And but that's just true. Like had Hasek been given the same amount of time in the league as your Waugh or your Brodeur, I honestly think he would be first or second in all those major records when it comes to wins, shutouts, the whole 9 yards, man. He would even have even more than his 6 Vezina trophies. He'd have probably maybe one more cup, in my opinion. And when he did come in the league, he was behind Eddie Belfour, who was already established.
Yeah.
Comes to Buffalo, gets traded to Buffalo, and possibly one of the biggest steals in franchise history. And is right splitting time with Grant Fuhr, a guy who, won 5 Stanley Cups with Edmonton, the 5 or 6. So it's, it was difficult for him to even, establish himself as a starter in this league. But when he did, man, he just never looked back, and he is the greatest of all time. And I don't care what anybody says. Find me a goalie from that era till now that has, even the goalies that we've seen over the last decade, find me a goalie that has the kind of hardware that Dominik Hasek does. individual
Yeah,
artwork.
it's
Doesn't.
Okay.
None of them do.
it'll be a
So, he
long
was one
time
of a
before
kind.
someone does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was
for
one
sure.
of a kind, like in terms of the way he played and his style and everything. Like everything about him was one of a kind. But yeah, I'll tell you what, like if I get the Hasek jersey, I'll send you this one to burn. How's that sound?
You can throw it on the ice for us.
No, you don't need to. Yeah. That's actually a good way to go viral on Twitter.
There you go.
Throw a Turdberger jersey on
Yeah.
the ice.
Dwayne
people-
Steinel at it again.
People
Yeah.
won't take that seriously though because it's a Turdberger. He's like,
Yeah.
he would never wear that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was probably gonna burn it anyway. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. He probably just accidentally missed the trash can. Like
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dwayne, for joining us. Do you want to plug your podcast before we sign out for the night?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. Two goalies, one mic. You can find us on YouTube. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, SoundCloud, whatever, Google Podcasts, and just on number 2, goalies, number 1, and then Mike, MIC. So I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I said, first off, I love the podcast name CreaseCast. I was all about it. So anytime you want to have me on, just let me know. I'm always down. And, vice versa. If you guys ever want to plug yourselves over in Western New York, just
Hell
give me a
yeah.
holler. We'll get you on.
Well,
sounds good.
that sounds good, man. We'll hopefully catch up later in the season when both the Canucks and Buffalo are officially out of it, and we're evaluating the goaltenders of the
you wanna do it-
Evaluating their
NHL
golf
playoffs.
swings.
If
Yeah.
you want to evaluate this draft class next week, I'm sure. I mean, why not? I mean, we're already there. We're already there. We're already talking about the draft. So between Shane Wright and guys like Logan Cooley. So
Yeah.
I don't even think Shane Wright's the consensus first pick right now. I think it's
I might
tight.
be falling a bit.
Yeah.
Go on a bit.
Yeah. But anyways, Wayne, thanks for having us or for joining us. Much appreciated.
No problem.
Everybody, follow 2 goalies, 1 Mike, and leave them 5-star reviews. You guys aren't doing it for us, but at least do it for him for the guest. So come on. Do your job,
Appreciate that,
listeners.
guys. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Hey, it helps, for you guys. It helps me. Like those
Yeah.
5-star reviews, they do go a long way in getting you guys
do.
out there.
God, yeah.
Yeah,
Now it's
pay it forward.
Spotify's got them
In fact,
too.
you know what? Just because of that, I'm gonna go give you guys a 5-star review.
Aw.
Oh, beautiful.
thank
We're going to
you.
do the same for you too.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
it, guys.
All right. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that interview we had with Duane Steinel, again, of the 2 Goalies, 1 Mike podcast. Big episode, jam-packed episode. Canucks officially win against Chicago. 3-1. I don't know. My stream actually, like, the scoreboard broke, and so it looked to me like the game ended at 2-0. So when it finally
interesting.
changed to 3-1, I was like, did I
Yeah,
watch an old game? What?
yeah, you're like,
happened
you're
here?
like, who is this? Like, you're like, I don't remember this. I don't remember this Chilios guy. Like, who is he
Yeah.
for the Hawks? He must be new.
Yeah.
But yeah, you said that when you said the shutout thing, like during the show or whatever. I had it like up in a window above it, and it was like they had just scored the breaker goal.
Oh
like
shit!
the-
I totally, yeah. I
but
didn't
like
see that
just
at all.
beforehand, and I was like,
awesome.
"Oh, you're behind, aren't you?" Like,
I-
because yeah,
I was behind, I guess, and my my stream apparently was just like completely broken. So I had no idea what was going on when I looked at NHL.com and it was like 3-1 and Luke Shen scored. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
but hey,
all right.
they're back in the win column now, and it was
They're back in the win column after
were-
a pathetic game against Calgary. They come into their next game riding a teeny tiny bit of momentum. Players are going to be vying for jobs, saying, "Please don't trade me, Jimmy. Please don't do it. I like
Besser.
Vancouver."
Brock
Brock
Besser got a
Besser.
goal. Like,
Yeah,
that's a
he
big-
needed it to, I guess, pump up his trade value.
No, well, the thing, I think the thing was today, right? It was like it depends on if they can get an extension figured out. So
Right.
in the sense of, because again, contrary to what the last management regime told us, you can actually get those done ahead of time. Believe it or not, you do
Wait,
not have to
what?
drag it out until late September.
Are you
So
serious?
yeah, so basically it's an idea of like, yeah, if they can get a deal done, if they can get an extension done sooner rather than later, that bodes very well that he stays, which is again, he should. I would think that's like one of the few guys who's not on the untouchables list, whose
Yeah.
name is out there, that I'm like, you would be very crazy and silly to like give up on him this quickly and this early, even if he's not your guy. Like, God, keep Brock Besser. He is He is
he's
good.
such a wholesome boy.
He's a wholesome boy, and I swear he's really, really good.
He's very good.
Better.
You guys just don't appreciate
You
him.
caught us all in it's almost like you caught us in a bad year. Like,
I know.
yeah.
We should probably close out now, because if we talk more about Brock Besser, what's going to happen is on Wednesday they'll trade him, and we'll have to wait until Monday's cycle where we get to discuss the aftermath. So we'll cut the talk there. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, you can find me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter and my website, ahlnucksharvest.com. I think the Abbotsford team plays Thursday, Friday this week. I'm pretty wiped, so I don't know if I'm even going to bother recapping the games, if I'm being completely honest. But as always, I'll probably do my late night stats updates on the weekends, get those out to you guys. Lachlan, where can the fine folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock at the Crease. You can also find my writing work over at CanucksArmy.com. I write there pretty frequently.
Swag.
And if you enjoyed the show, be sure to check out our CreaseCast Patreon, patreon.com/CreaseCast. Not only with we have $1 and $5 tiers. Not only do you get to find out who our guests are ahead of time, when we have them, you also get the Pacific Division power rankings that I have brought back for this year, just for our patrons, only for them, no one else. So go check those out, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and everything else as well.
Oh, and so I spoke to a couple of our Patreons while playing Warzone until 3 a.m. Last Saturday. They were suggesting call outs in our episodes, like thanks to Patreon subscriber and then their usernames. So
sure.
I think we'll start ending or beginning our episodes being like, thanks to Patreon user blah 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 for sponsoring this episode. I just told them to maybe change their username so there aren't something offensive like I kill kids or something.
Is that
something like horrible?
Is that a thing?
I don't know.
I have not noticed.
I don't know. I've never seen Patreon subscriber names. I don't know what it shows up as. So in any case, to you, the Patreons who support us, we much appreciate it. We'll start looking at shouting you guys out in the episodes, in the opener or in the closer, depending on how we feel on the day and depending on how good you do in Warzone, frankly. So until the next episode, folks, I've been Cody Sievertson. This is Lachlan Irvin, the man that built a place, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the CreaseCast. Bye.
Bye.